So Norm, you've got quite a fan club here today. We're going to have a short question and answer conversation between Debra and I and Norm. But before we get started on that, we'd like to acknowledge a couple of people who are in our audience today. Actually, Robin Mortarati is our director of photography and is responsible for many of the beautiful video and pictures that you saw here. And Robin is with us today from California. Robin, thank you so much for your contribution. And for those of you who are from California or the United States, you might have recognized the voice of anchorwoman Wendy Tokuda, and so she graciously agreed to do the voiceover for this. And also the musician, the composer who did the score for us is Derek Nakamoto from Los Angeles. So thank you very much to them for their contribution. So Norm, we're going to throw you a softball first. So after years of me haranguing you and us stalking you at every USJC conference and wherever you showed up, why did you finally say yes to doing the documentary?
Next question. You know, there had been a lot of people approaching us about us, meaning Alan Simpson and me, but I would be approached about books or various things. And I really wasn't interested in pursuing those because they all seemed like I would end up sort of like patting myself on the back. And that's not something I wanted to do. And so I had been requested on a number of occasions to do these things, and I kept saying no, 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 including to you. And so finally I just said, well, let's talk. And then when you told me that I would not have any editorial control of the filming, that it was their job and I would have no hand in that, and that there was a possibility that this might be on public broadcasting service. So there were elements of appeal. So I said, let's talk. And as it was being put together, it became apparent that I was going to be the subject, not have any say in anything. So I felt comfortable finally to sign that agreement to do the filming. And of course, Alan Simpson joined in that effort as well. So I hope all of you have enjoyed the result of Dianne and Debra's fine work.
Well, we're glad you said yes. So,
We're glad you're still talking to us.
So this week was a really important election in the U.S. And as a result of the importance of this election, it really sparked a lot of activism, a high level of voter engagement and participation. What do you think are some of the takeaway lessons for what occurred with this midterm election? And what can we learn, both in the U.S. as well as Japan, about civic engagement?
Well, I think that's part of the whole element today, is that we have lost really participation by people in community affairs. And the country is more polarized. You know, in the House and Senate, they don't know each other as individuals. They don't talk to each other. And I remember we'd have bills going through the subcommittee, fight in subcommittee, fight on the full committee, fight on the floor, slap each other on the back and say, okay, let's go have a drink, let's go have dinner. And that kind of civility existed. That essentially changed in 1994 with the election of the majority changing in the House and the election of Newt Gingrich as Speaker. And here I had been chairman of a major committee of the House Committee on Public Works and Transportation. And the Republican was Bud Schuster from Pennsylvania. And we'd have weekly meetings about what's the agenda, whose amendments are we going to accept, whose are we going to turn down. And so as a result of the '94 election, the majority changed. So I was now the ranking Democrat on the committee. And I was waiting for a call from the chairman. To discuss the agenda for the balance of the 2 years. No call. Second week, no call. So the third week, I called Bud. And I said, when are we going to get together to talk about the agenda? Oh, Norm, I'm sorry, I should have called you. The speaker says, we are now in the majority and we don't have to talk to you.
In the old days, you've talked a lot about
Oh.
how there were actually relationships that were developed
We had
across the aisle.
We had to have what we call the Big Four. Chairman of the full committee, ranking Republican on the full committee, chairman of the subcommittee, ranking Republican on the subcommittee. And we would meet on aviation. Another subcommittee would be transit. Another would be Federal Aviation Administration, or whatever the mode.
So we've also seen a new level of activism, certainly in the U.S. Voter registration is very high. Voter engagement and voter participation was extremely high in this election. Record numbers of women were elected, and we're seeing this resurgence, this new energy. And I know that you've spent a lot of your career helping to light the fire around civic engagement. Do you feel that we've got a momentum building now?
You know, the pundits were saying that the election of the House will change. It'll be 170 Democrats and 165 Republicans. So the Democrats had to gain 23 seats. As it turned out, they gained 39 seats. So they got a bigger margin than was predicted. Unfortunately, I don't think the gridlock that we've experienced is going to change. I think it's going to continue. And frankly, Mr. Trump is going to be emboldened by this election to be nastier, feistier, and just tougher. He already has now removed his Attorney General, brought in a new Attorney General who has been critical about, I think this administration is trying to obliterate the Obama administration from the books. And the new Attorney General has said the President is not subject to certain laws. So I don't believe there's going to be much of a change. The President started running for election Tuesday night, and we're going to have, I think, just a tougher time in the next 2 years, and nothing's going to get done. And I think this is just abominable. I mean, there are so many people who have dedicated so much of their lives to trying to make government work, to make lives better. And it's just not going to happen. So I'm really disappointed about what the future might be.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the future. You know, you're a product of both American upbringing and your Japanese heritage, as we were so privileged to see in Mishima the other day. So for you, what do you think are the Western and the Japanese cultural traits that influence your leadership style? And I'm thinking about words like American initiative and independence and competition versus the Japanese values of gaman or endyo or giri. And you know, for those of us who don't speak so much Japanese, gaman is sort of forbearance, endurance, right? Endyo is holding back a little bit, and giri is that sense of obligation that comes in a society where the whole is often more important than the individual.
I'm sorry, would you repeat that? Approved number 2 question.
So what did you take out of being Japanese American from the Japanese side and the American side that made you successful?
Well, I think the greatest influence originally was my father. And then there was another Issei in San Jose by the name of I.K. Ishimatsu, very successful celery grower, but he said early on that the reason we got evacuated in turn was we had no access to the people who were in political office. And so in 1946, he would go around collecting money from the Japanese community, $1, $2, and then he'd buy 2 tickets to the Republican Central Committee dinner, and he'd buy 2 tickets to the Democratic Central Committee dinner, and send Niseis to them just to get exposure. And so by 1960, I guess it was, I became a beneficiary of one of those tickets. But the whole thing was the whole issue about issues being discussed, and you're not at the table when those issues are being discussed. I mean, here's someone else making decisions about which they don't know anything about. And so I've always encouraged young people.
Well, you know, this may be a good time to give a shout out to Ellen Kamei, who is an alum from the Emerging Leaders Program. Ellen, are you out there right now? There.
Hi, Ellen.
So we interviewed Ellen's mother, Rosemary, but Ellen was right next to her. And Ellen recently, well, not recently, day before yesterday, is now the new, is it Mountain View City Council member?
Yeah.
Yes. And so, Ellen, congratulations. And, you know, just what a wonderful.
So that makes 2 Japanese American women on the Mountain View City Council, Margaret Abe Koga and Ellen Kamei. So 3 cheers for Mountain View.
So here we are at USJC, and we certainly saw from the programs that USJC is dedicating a good portion of its programming, its work, to developing young leaders. And for those of us that know you and know your career, Norm, we know that you have dedicated much of your career to being a mentor, to serving as an advisor. In fact, many of your mentees are in this room, people you've had relationships for years and helped to develop their careers. So as we look at the present day, what's the advice that you have for young leaders today?
Well, first of all, I want to commend Irene Hirano Inoue for her leadership in the formation originally of the U.S.-Japan Council, and Tom Eno, the founding chair of the U.S.-Japan Council, and their board of directors for the leadership that they've shown since the start of USJC in terms of not only the promotion of U.S.-Japan relations, but also having a pipeline of developing young leaders. And this is so important. So I want to thank all of those who have been involved with the policy direction and the drive, including Irene and her great staff and board of directors for what they're doing.
What's terrific too is that that pipeline that they've built is not just in the U.S. but also now in Japan, which is quite exciting as well.
And the other thing I think I'm finding too, that in terms of the Japanese embassy in Washington, D.C., they have taken it upon themselves, whether it's Ambassador Sugiyama, Sasaya, all these ambassadors we've had, fortunate to have, who have reached out to the Japanese American community to try to engage them in terms of the activities that are part of the Japanese embassy. And so now we see not only delegations of Japanese American students that they're sending to Japan, but Chinese Americans, Korean Americans, Vietnamese Americans. And just the other day, I had a meeting with Minister Mukai from the embassy, because they've talked about programs of students and others coming to Japan. But he said, we don't have Japanese going to the United States. So in September of 2019, there will be 50 members of the Japan chorus that will be coming to the United States. And so I helped arrange the use of the Millennium stage at the Kennedy Center for the Japan chorus, and they're going to try and recruit a youth chorus in Washington, D.C. to perform with them. And so it'll be a program working in both directions, and they're hoping to have a big concert of the Japan chorus and the youth chorus at the embassy residence in September. So again, this is another facet of what is being done to not only build that U.S.-Japan relationship, but I think they're also interested in finding a way of developing their own way of recruiting young people to come to the United States.
So I'm going to try one more time. I'm going to come back around and ask you about the advice question.
Wait, let me interrupt you for just a second. We do this a lot during the 4 or 5 years. Before you go back to that question, I think it's appropriate and maybe breaking protocol to give a shout out to Foreign Minister Taro Kono, who's joined us today, because he has worked very, very hard to integrate U.S.-Japan relations, and especially with Japanese Americans. So Kono-san, thank you very much.
Hi, Taro-san. Please stand. Please stand. As all of you know, his father was speaker at the Diet, and he also was a student at Georgetown University. And so we go back a long time. It's great to see you all the time, and especially in this very responsible job you have now as Minister of Foreign Affairs. So again, thank you for taking the time to be here, Taro-san. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here. So this question about advice, you have a lot of young people in the audience, young professionals, and I know that you often speak with them, and they often are listening for that special pearl of wisdom that you share with them about kind of the secrets that you can share about leadership. So what are you sharing with young people today about enhancing their leadership skills and their future opportunities?
They'll find themselves in terms of those opportunities. But I tell them you have two things that no one else owns and that you control. One is your name, and the other is your integrity. And you've got to preserve those two no matter what you do. And if you take any shortcuts to get to some goal you want to get to, don't do it. There's so many people who get into political office and they'll set their eye on a goal, and they'll keep their eye on that goal out there, and they'll trip over something right in front of them. And so you can't take shortcuts, and as I said, you've got to protect your name and your integrity, because that integrity brings you trust on behalf of others who look to you for advice or leadership. And if you don't have that trust and integrity, then people will write you off. They won't come to you for advice if you don't have that integrity. So there are so many people in public office, I think, who fail. They're driven, but they lose sight of what it is that is important in their own pursuit of those goals. And to me, the integrity of their persona is very, very important.
We'll take it from the man who knows. We've had screenings in different places in the US and now Japan. And ostensibly this is a film about Norman Mineta and his contributions, both in his life and his career. But also I think you detect the sub-themes of immigration, detention, social justice, civic engagement, political civility. So Norm, what do you hope that people take away after watching the film?
To me, the film isn't really about me. It's really about the process, and why should people work hard to try to be at the table where decisions are being made. And so I would hope that by watching or seeing this film that they will understand that networking is important, that your relationship with others as you're doing the network and doing your work. And as I said, to me, regardless of what you do, integrity has always got to be protected by people, and I hope that that's conveyed in this film, and that it's not so much, what did Norm do, but how is it that we can all learn from the process of working together. And that's one thing about this president. He doesn't know the word us. He knows me, and it's in capital letters. It's not in lowercase. And so he looks at everything in terms of how does it help me? What does it do to benefit me? So again, I hope if there's nothing else people get from this, it's really collaboration, us, really dealing with people on a civil basis and to try to work together to get things done.
So, as you know, we only had 1 hour to work with. Our film is a little less than an hour, and there were literally dozens of interviews that we did with you, and many interviews that we did with others who didn't quite make the final product. So, as we reflect on this process and on your life, certainly, what do you hope your legacy will be?
Again, that you can get things done by working collaboratively. And I think the whole issue, again, I keep coming back to it, it's boring because it's nothing exciting or, quote, sexy, unquote, about it. But to me, integrity is so important to all of what someone may want to do. And it comes, public life really subjects you to temptations. And so the issue about making sure you're not going down the wrong road. And part of that is some people, again, as I said earlier, will try to take shortcuts. But I've never seen examples where shortcuts will get you somewhere if you don't think about integrity in that process.
Thank you.
Could I just take a minute to introduce my wife, Denny. Honey? She's been a source of pride and a lot of good advice. Not that I take it all. But she's just been tremendous. She's very bright and tells me, not from her perspective, but just different from a different perspective than I might have. And she can be tough. She is tough. So thank you for all you've done, honey. And if I might, some of my relatives from Mishima have come up here. So could I have just this short row here of relatives who came
You're in the
from
second
here?
row. Will you
Please,
stand
those
and be
are-
acknowledged?
Please. That's it.
A few days ago, they shared their warm hospitality in Mishima and welcomed Dianne and me and our crew. So thank you again very much. Thank you very much.
But also, before we go, we owe a debt of gratitude to Norm and to Denny and their sons, their 4 sons. It was not easy to allow us the kind of access that we needed to do this film. They were gracious, they were hospitable, they were classy. We were not. But thank you so much. Thank you.
You mean you're not coming back? Oh, thank you.
So as we're wrapping up our program, we have one last item to do. We have a special surprise.
So, on behalf of the USJC family, the board, the staff, and the thank you to Debra and Dianne, just congratulations. No, you don't have to get up. Dennis will hold these. But Norm, we just want to say how proud we are of you and how much that we love you, how much that we value all that you do, and how great it is to have you as a part of the council. So thank you.
Well, there was no greater mentor that I had than Senator Dianne Inouye. And you talk about integrity. There's example number one. I remember when he was elected in 1959, and that year we had the JCL bowling tournament in San Jose. And I was the chair of the banquet committee. So as soon as he got elected, I called him up right away. And I said, would you come and speak to our bowling convention? Well, you know, Dan's thinking, bowling? And, but he came, and you know, it was just a tremendous event. And so here he was, he spoke Saturday night, came in Saturday morning, spoke Saturday night, stayed overnight, Sunday morning, back to Hawaii. I mean, just like that. But he was a great friend to me, great mentor, and so I was very thankful to have his guiding hand. So thank you, Irene.
Thank you. So we have one other little special surprise. I'm going to ask Denny to come up, and I'm going to ask Foreign Minister Kono to come up with us. We have a little surprise for Norm, and if we could fit all of you on the stage, that we would. But, so Norm has a special day coming up, and on Monday, it's his birthday. So we're all going to sing happy birthday. Ready? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Dear Norman. Happy birthday to you.
Oh, wow. The reason they don't have 87 candles on there is the fire alarm system would go off.
So happy birthday to Norm and many more.
Let me make a wish for thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Great to have you here. Thank you. Hi again.
Okay, and I think with that, we're done. Thank you. Great job.
Safe travels home, everybody.